Giants in the Antarctic, frozen in stasis. We've all heard the stories from the past of the giants whom walked the earth and are alleged to have created the Great Pyramids. Whether they are the Anunnaki or the giants whom battled them, if you Google it, a search for giants that have been in hibernation and stasis for thousands of years will find you staring at your screen with your mouth wide open. On top of that, these giants are beginning to awaken, according to independent sources. Could these giants be the very reason for all the recent activity in the Antarctic? Corey Goode, a secret space program whistleblower, was among the first to make statements about these stasis chambers that were holding perfectly preserved giants for thousands of years. When I was in the space program, the secret space program, there was lots of bits of information that I looked at. One of them was that there were giants that they found underneath the surface of the Earth. They called them stasis beings.
Secretary of State Kerry was sent down there.
To Antarctica.
I believe Obama's gone down there.
To Antarctica.
I know the Pope has gone down there.
To Antarctica.
Several states, leaders of state have gone down there.
To Antarctica.
And it's supposed to be to get them ready for what's about to happen, a sort of disclosure.
To Antarctica.
Except from what I'm hearing, they don't want disclosure. They're removing the bodies of what's called the pre-Adamites.
To Antarctica.
Much like the Greys type of skull. And they're taller, and they have a funny body because they have a longer, or more vertebrae in their backbone. So it's kind of long, and then they got this little pot belly. The way Akhenaten is portrayed in the images from Egypt, they have those type of bodies.
To Antarctica.
Almost a feminine-like body, flat chest, very little muscles for the masculine, and large hips, this little pot belly, and a much longer torso with an elongated skull.
To Antarctica.
So those were called the pre-Adamites. They were far more intelligent, and they became troublesome, so they went to the newer version, which is us. We have shorter lifespans and limited capacity for memory. We're sort of wiped when we're born. We don't have access to those memories, and then we also don't have telepathics. So we're the second species that followed. And much of that is in a lot of the writings of the Hebrew. Not everything that was in the Hebrew writings were put into the Bible. They had to decide what was going to go in and what was going to stay out.
To Antarctica.
And this one they decided to leave out because it was just too troublesome. And they went with the creation of Adam and Eve and left the other one out altogether.
To Antarctica.
So that's what they're finding down there. Now, this civilization is supposed to have been flash frozen. And I know we've spoken before about the possibility that Earth is not that old, only 12,000 years old, because of the galactic battle that took place between the Reptilians and the Anunnaki.
To Antarctica.
If that were the case, then Earth would have broken away, much of its atmosphere would have been gone. It would just be basically what would have been an island on that particular planet the size of Saturn. Would have become a sphere, and then would have tried to, I guess, regrow life on it. It would have kept some of its atmosphere, but we've lost a lot of the oxygen. We used to have 50% oxygen in the snow core. They find that before 12,000 years, we had 50% oxygen. After that, it's down to 20%, 19%.
To Antarctica.
Somewhere in there. But the flash freeze of these beings, there's also giants down there and dinosaurs that were flash frozen. The mastodons, I understand, are 3 times the size of an elephant, and they were flash frozen.
To Antarctica.
And to flash freeze, a pole shift would not do that. Pole shift would change. You'd have time to go grab a coat. You don't have time for that when you're flash frozen. You're basically mid-stride, completely stopped. All your blood vessels freeze, everything freezes. It's way too fast. And from what I understand, they're removing these bodies. They've been down there for over 12 years, filming, removing, very sophisticated technology. And they're eventually going to have some sort of tour down there, I guess you can take, and walk through these ruins. From what David Wilcock and several others have as well, there were 3 spaceships that crash landed there. Again, it was 12,000 years ago.
To Antarctica.
Right at the time of that galactic battle. And they speculate that these individuals landed there because there was already an ancient civilization there, dating back millions of years. And of course, that would have been Tiamat, part of Tiamat at the time. So they landed there. The ships couldn't get back off. of Earth. So they started, I guess, building cities around there. Again, this would have had to have Tiamat, not Earth, because once Earth took place, these guys were flash frozen in position. They know that there's a tropical jungle down there, I believe 65,000 square miles. That was all flash frozen.
Antarctica.
So Antarctica was at one time a tropical location, and it was flash frozen very quickly. Plato puts it right at about the same time, 9,000 years before him. And he said it all happened in one day. So if the explosion occurred within a day, Earth would have sort of corrected itself and started trying to heal. But anything along the periphery where the atmosphere was completely ripped off would have been flash frozen. But you have to also throw in the reptilians, because the reptilians needed more warrior-like individuals. And if you take a look at these guys, they're not warrior material. So they would have modified us. And we came afterwards, and then the Anunnaki took what the reptilians had modified and tried to sort of bring it back in line with what they were. And that's why we ended up the way we've ended up. Very warlike, sex maniacs that have short lifespans and become very aggressive at sometimes. It's sort of hardwired into our nature.
Antarctica.
Every single one of these groups that I hear that are trying to do, I guess, make contracts with the humans on Earth, they have to go through all these other species that already have, I guess, programs, they call them, on Earth, where they've been abducting people and trying to get them to meet someone else, sort of prearrange it so that they'd be attracted to individuals. They're looking for a genetic breeding sort of system. You've heard of those, where the Greys were abducting women and creating a hybrid species.
Oh yeah,
with
absolutely.
some of their cells.
Antarctica.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. These women would be like 3 months pregnant, and all of a sudden they wouldn't be pregnant at all. They go to the doctor didn't want to hear anything about it, so they didn't have anyone to turn to. But those things they're creating are not human, and you can't take a child, especially something that's predominantly genetically human, and just keep it in isolation. Don't hold it, just leave it in a corner to develop on its own. It's going to have psychological damage, and it's probably not going to live past the age of 14. Humans have to be interacted with, they have to be held, you have to play with them, or they don't develop properly. So that seems to be a big problem for them. And then once they're down here, they don't have any common sense. I mean, I've seen people with no common sense that were very, very intelligent. These people, they just do not know how to blend in. And I don't know that they ever will. Supposedly that's what they were trying to do.
Antarctica.
I don't know why they're trying to do it, because it serves no purpose. If they're that intelligent, just leave them on the ships, train them to operate your ships. It doesn't make any sense to bring them to Earth. The only thing I could see why they would want to bring them to Earth is because of what people are calling the Ascension, or what is believed to be the Ascension. When that happens, they would want them to be on Earth.
Antarctica.
They have the ability to make you do things. Telepathically, they can control you. They can make you wake up, get dressed, go get your car, and drive out into the road where they're waiting for you. From the people that they've already, like, let's say it's their parent, one of the people that they took cells from, created them. I've heard of that. They don't like that control at all. When they're at a job, like they try and fit in and get a job somewhere, they don't really work very well. So they have to, let's say they go to a restaurant, they have to control the person giving them the food and make it look like they got paid when they didn't, but that person ends up getting fired. And just little things like that. It's something they can't keep up. These things, the Greys, there's two types of them. The work I did trying to figure out what these were, the ones I was dealing with, during Eisenhower's meeting in the desert, there was a priest who was at the location, and he was told to keep quiet, but he didn't. He went to the Vatican and told them what had happened. There were several species meeting with the president and several other individuals. And they wanted us to disarm, and they would assist us in what's about to happen, so we'd be ready for the ascension. The others, the Greys, offered weapons and technology in exchange for abducting humans. They went with those guys.
To Antarctica. To Antarctica.
What was fascinating about them, though, was when they were abducting individuals, the military ordered them to only abduct 400 per year, and they needed the names and dates of the locations and addresses of these people. What the Greys said, these particular type of Greys, they said that they were from Earth. They said they were from the future, and they said they were horribly damaged by the radiation. Something bad had happened. They had gone underground into underground bunkers, and they thought they would survive. But what happened was females could not reproduce after 45 days underground.
To Antarctica.
And then they had to use their cloning technology. That sounds pretty far-fetched, but I've seen cloning technology is very real. Anyway, these guys had it at that time, and that was the only way they could survive, by cloning themselves over and over and over. They were trapped underground during the earthquakes that took place. And this would be somewhere about what we would call the apocalypse time frame. Anyway, they finally got out of there. And when they got to the surface, they were horribly damaged by the radiation. The military jumped to the conclusion it was some sort of ICBM war with other countries here on the planet. I immediately suspected the power plants, because if we lose power or one of those gets damaged, they start releasing a tremendous amount of radiation. They have a lot of fuel rods that will burn for a long time. And that will cause a huge cloud of radiation that will pretty much poison anything gets anywhere near it. There's 120 on the East Coast alone. So you've got a tremendous amount of death just there for people. Anyway, these guys said that their DNA was horribly damaged, that some other extraterrestrials came by, found them, and took them to their worlds. And so when these Greys, when you see them, smooth skin with the almond-shaped eyes, those are actually an outer suit that they wear. And some movies have brought this out, some documentaries. Underneath, their skin looks like the bark of a tree and smells like putrid cinnamon. And you don't want to touch it. They have so much bacteria on them.
To Antarctica.
They had kept themselves alive for a long time. There were some of them that had some human cells. And those are the ones I believe that are trying to create these birthing projects. But this particular group came back to Earth, and they said they wanted to get the DNA from their ancestors, the ones who went down into these subterranean cities that they had for themselves, their bunkers, and repair their DNA using the DNA of their great ancestors, their grandfathers, their parents. And that's not what they did. They started abducting a lot of people.
To Antarctica.
Way more than 400. And then they started messing with them in a way that would sort of wake them up spiritually and move them away from the path that would have taken them into the underground bunkers. That's why they weren't releasing any of the addresses or the names of these individuals. So basically what they did was they found a way to prevent their grandfathers and grandmothers from ever meeting with each other, or their parents from ever meeting with each other. That means they had to cease existing, and thereby creating a sort of self-sacrifice. I believe that's why it was permitted to be done. Anyway, that was that particular group. So they prevented them from going down in underground bunkers. When the military started doing experiments in the 50s with women in colleges, asking for volunteers to stay underground for long periods of time, they realized that after about 45 days, the women's reproductive system shut down.
To Antarctica.
So they realized these things were telling the truth. And then they started building the underground bunkers because they figured they would need them for these, whatever event was coming up into the future.
To Antarctica.
Also, most of the Greys, the little ones we see that walk in 4 or 5 at a time, those in the Bible, in Scripture, are called the Reptilians, dead things, because they're not alive. They're more machine. They're biomechanical. So they don't have souls. So people hear, oh, they don't have souls, they must be demons. And no, they're just machines. They answer to, commands, They can perform simple functions, but you only give them as much brain power as they need, and that's what it takes 3 or 4 of them to accomplish the job. But in the Bible, when you hear Reptilian, just think of the little gray ones. That's what those are.
Antarctica.
And they have found these signals coming from space, and they seem to have been sent from the past into the future. And these signals pretty much tell them how to build these machines. So guess what they're doing? Oh, let's build them. Let's see who can build them first. And that's not smart. These were AIs who lost the war long ago, so they sent this information to the future, hoping somebody would be dumb enough to build these things. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Antarctica.
It's a very ancient war that took place. They never really lost, sort of just kind of to be continued. And that was the reason Tiamat was destroyed. Remember that black goo that ran all over the ley lines of that world? It was a massive artificial intelligence controlling that planet. And if any part of them gets destroyed in any kind of battle, or we find a way to destroy them, then that information is transmitted to the others so they'll know what we're about to try. And so they released it into the sewer lines, work against it. In other words, to fortify themselves against that type of attack. And the black goo is a sort of nanite. I understand the military immediately thought super soldier, right? Because these things can get inside of you and modify you at the molecular level. And so they released it into the sewer lines. They're that small. And they did. They started modifying people. But what they started, these things weren't creating super soldiers. They were creating superhumans, but they were more benevolent. They were less aggressive.
Antarctica.
Calmer. They just had this desire to either learn a lot of languages or learn a lot of sophisticated information.
Antarctica.
And it worked, just not what the government wanted because they couldn't control it. And so they released it into the sewer lines over in Europe. That particular group did. And so this stuff got into all the organisms in the sewers and then became airborne. And anyone who living next to these things all of a sudden started reading more and speaking different languages. And it's pretty fascinating when you hear these people talk about it. But they sort of tracked it down and found out what it was. It was the AIs that were released into the sewer systems.
Antarctica.
So this has already been released, but it is working more in a beneficial way. Now the AIs, apparently the reptilians are allied with the AI, and their bodies are completely saturated by these tiny nanites. But the Greys used to be slaves to the reptilians, from what I understand. They broke away. The whole AI thing is interesting when you start looking at autism, because if you take a human child and make them catatonic through all these injections you give them, an AI system like this could easily infiltrate their body, connect where they need to, and run the body. Give them a vessel, sort of.
Antarctica.
Well, we're making some headway, but these people, they're still very powerful and in very powerful positions. So draining the swamp's going to take a little longer, I think. One of the things I wanted to connect Planet X with, we started talking about that. This, going back 12,000 years, again, 12,000 years, everything always goes back to 12,000 years, the major damage that took place. To, let's say our world exploded, right, or blew up, somebody blew it up. And we're right on the edge of the section that, gets blown out into space. Well, the atmosphere is gone, and space is incredibly cold, so you're subjected to the space without the warmth of Earth around or anything else around, and you would literally flash freeze.
Antarctica.
Because of the temperature from space.
Antarctica.
How cold it is. And that's the only way I would see that something could flash freeze. I don't see any other way you could do it. There was that movie, The Day After Tomorrow, with those gigantic vortexes that allowed the outer space temperatures to drop in because they weren't being pushed back. Sort of like a reverse vacuum.
Antarctica.
And brought the cold temperatures down. And in that movie, they portrayed people just kind of taking a breath and just freezing in place.
Antarctica.
There's also that fox down, and something similar to that happened over in Russia. There was a fox crossing a stream. You could see his nose out of the ice, and his eyes and ears out of the ice, and the tip of his tail out of the ice, but the rest of him is in the ice. So he was swimming across the stream, and that flash froze. That was back when we were first experiencing those polar vortexes they speak of. These beings, there were quite a few beings here on this world, but according to what they call the Muhammad Accord, something they signed back in the 16th century, or actually 6th century, they're not supposed to show themselves anymore. They're supposed to remain hidden and just kind of allow humanity to see what would play out, kind of hide in the shadows, the hidden hand sort of thing, to run the world that way. And apparently, because of all the pedophile stuff coming out and all the attention being drawn upon them, they're kind of trying to shine a spotlight over in that direction. Hey, look over here. And, oh, this is so important and monumental, we just need to put this pedophile stuff aside and we'll get back to it later, which they never will. What they want to do is basically put us in a bigger box. Inside the box we're in right now, there's no such thing as aliens, off-world, or life from other worlds. In this bigger box that they want to put us in, there were a type of humanoid on Earth, or possibly Mars, that was very advanced. Their world was destroyed. They came here to Earth and eventually got flash frozen down. And the South Pole, they'll probably claim there was some sort of pole shift.
To Antarctica.
And we got mixed with them in the breeding, just natural selection sort of thing. And then humanity sort of came out of that, is what they're planning to do. They want to spread out the technology release over 100 years so that by the time the disclosures happen, everybody will be dead, the ones who committed all these atrocities against humanity, so they won't be held accountable.
To Antarctica.
Anyway, that's their plan. I don't think it'll work because there's other plans in the works. But that's kind of what's taking place on there and why they're releasing this information.